Welcome to Not Your Mother's Radio. Tonight, Elliot will be joined by Zappa alumni, Mike Keneally. Also on hand to lend assistance is another Zappa alumni, Ed Mann. Mike, a well-established musician in his own right, is probably most well known as former Frank Zappa stunt guitarist and a Zappa 1988 tour band member on both guitar and keyboards. His ascendency to that position is legendary in certain musician circles, based on Keneally's command of Zappa's vast and difficult-to-play repertoire. Keneally had called Zappa and said that he was extremely familiar with all of his material and that he would be ready to play any of it for him given a short amount of preparation time, as he had already been listening to Zappa's music for 16 years. On the phone the day before the audition, Frank had told Mike to have What's New in Baltimore and Sinister Footwear ready for the next day's audition. On the way to the audition, Keneally practiced the aforementioned songs, as well as Little House I Used to Live In, and every single Zappa melody he could think of, kind of as an exercise for his memory as his brother Marty was driving the car. Keneally's stint in the Zappa touring band was short-lived with the early cancellation of the 1988 tour and Zappa's death in 1993. Keneally moved on from the elder Zappa's band to work with the eldest Zappa son, Dweezil, on his solo albums and work released as the band Z. Keneally has also released 11 albums of solo material since 1992 and has guested or acted as sideman on a wide variety of projects, most notably as part of Steve Vai's touring bands. Remember that this radio show is listener-funded. If you wish to contribute, our PayPal info is notyourmothersradio@gmail.com. That's notyourmothersradio@gmail.com. We would like to thank you in advance for any contributions.
Ed, almost, I guess, a year ago now. Well, no, not about, yeah, almost a year. And we've become...
Is it?
Yeah, I mean, we've been locked up for almost a year, Ed.
This last year.
Yeah.
I know, man.
It defies perception as chronological time, you know?
Yeah, it does. And so I met Ed.
Simultaneously the shortest and longest year ever.
Yeah, actually, so we met, and Ed turned me on to a lot of the Zappa alumni guys, and I knew, one or two guys, but it kind of led me to the old mothers. I'm pretty friendly with Bunk now, and Dom and Ian Underwood, so... I kind of cut my teeth on for the last year. I kind of learned a lot about Frank and the guys who worked with him. And I'm really... We were supposed to talk months ago, but you had to... you had some recordings to do, you big show-off.
Is this the first time for Mike?
Yeah.
First time for Mike on this show?
First time for Mike.
This is the first... Yeah. This is the first time.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't realize.
Yeah. Mike was going to do a show a few months ago, but he was recording at the time. He couldn't. He had a couple of deadlines, I think, in December, right, Mike?
Well, I perpetually have deadlines, and I'm on one right now. But I just realized that I can't let them rule my life.
There you go. The whole timeline. Yeah, and So anyway, welcome to the show, and. I'm going to be honest with you. Out of all of the Zappa guys, as the years went on and it got closer to the end of the Zappa band, information on you guys are harder and harder to find. It seems that...
we are enigmas.
You are. You definitely are enigmas. And you're involved, I know, in the Travis... club, so to speak. You're doing all of the hologram tours. You're getting ready for the King Crimson tour, if that ever happens too, right?
If it ever happens, yeah.
It's
there's no way to know.
No, I know, but you're in that band, so you're gonna, you're kind of you're leading that whole new resurgence of people getting into Frank Zappa, and that's just great. And it really is that this man's music is probably more viable now than it was when I was a fan, which is staggering.
Oh,
I think that actually is in a weird way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the longer something hangs out, somehow a lot of the other baggage attached to it just falls by the wayside, and it becomes easier for people to just assess the quality of the music and also the just like the storyline of the life. and the career, and it just becomes more clear that this is a one of a kind phenomenon. This person.
Yeah. Okay. And it definitely works. It's incredible how Frank's music it just kind of took on a life of its own. It was always there, but it kind of has its own legs now. And I spoke to guys like Scott Tunis and everything like that. And the later guys, Zappa people, were the guys who really knew their music. They knew they were more technically involved. They were more technically adequate, and they made his music.
Well, I don't know about that.
Yeah, even if you get back to the earliest Mothers, you got Ian Underwood there.
Yeah,
no,
but I'm just saying, you guys. Oh, you have an echo. That I don't think it's mine.
There is an echo going on.
Really? Hold on.
I think it's gone now.
Okay, good. I might have had one of my pants was up. Okay, yeah, but not that they weren't technically sufficient, but the later guys, the Ed Manns, the Tunises, the Keneallys, you guys were.
Well, it really started, I think, with like Artie Tripp. He was like an amazing world-class musician, not just drummer but percussionist, and. But Ian,
of course,
was always there.
Yeah,
and then later, you think about the freaking Roxy era. I mean, that's just beyond belief. Really, the band with
right.
Bruce,
Yeah,
and Chester, kind of Ainsley, Artie Tripp, Ian. Was probably what am I talking about? Don Preston.
Yeah, Donald was great.
Yeah, I know. Absolutely. Ainsley's a fascinating case, man. Ainsley blows me away. I love Ainsley's drumming with Frank.
Yeah.
And I remember having a conversation with him about his playing on stuff like the Grand Wazoo, because that first piece on there for Calvin and his first two Hitchhikers, it's quite an unbelievable piece. And I'm Ainsley didn't read down those charts, and the parts are ridiculous. And I remember asking him, obviously this had to be just insane, constant drilling and constant rehearsal. He didn't remember ever having played the song. He didn't remember the recording session.
Yeah,
but when you listen to it, it's a miraculous drum performance. It's just incredible.
I met Ainsley when he was in Journey, and I saw Ainsley play with the Flo and Eddie phase band. All that stuff. And
sure.
He always was an incredible drummer, and I knew of Ainsley when he was with the old British bands, the Ainsley Dunbar Retaliation, and all that stuff. I was always a big fan of Ainsley's, and he kind of reminded me of like that Cozy Powell type of a drummer who could just do about anything.
Cozy Powell was an amazing drummer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cozy Powell,
absolutely.
Yeah, Cozy.
Well, when Frank hired Vinny. When all those auditions were going on, there was a lot of. That's the most people I've ever seen audition over a period of a couple of days, and Vinny was kind of like last out of maybe 30 people,
really?
And so Frank pulled me aside for a minute and said, "I don't know, what do you think?" And there's a couple good players that Tuggy and I were talking about, and Frank said, "I think it's Ainsley. I think it's Vinny because he reminds me of Ainsley. His groove."
Yeah. Well, I understand that that Flo and Eddie band was. I saw them play, but I understand they had a deep. Frank had a deep part in his heart for that band. He really loved those guys, and I always considered Frank Zappa's career to be pre-Flo and Eddie and post-Flo and Eddie.
Yeah, well, it kind of was because
he
was in a wheelchair for a year in between.
Yeah,
right.
So, and then when he emerged, it was a whole different thing.
Yeah, it was. That's what I mean. When after that, it kind of got to Sofa. It kind of got into more of a jazzy fusion type of a feel to his bands, and that's what he needed you guys for.
So good, man. He was into such a good jazz thing. I'm convinced one of the reasons he stopped is that it was so good.
Really?
And he couldn't stand it. Oh yeah, like Wazoo,
Yeah.
and all that.
I know, it is ridiculous.
Modern jazz and those recordings. So, there's what's the other one?
Waka Jawaka.
Waka Jawaka. That stuff is so good, and even if you evaluate it strictly from a jazz point of view.
But that's
just good.
But that started with Hot Rats, right? That whole feel. But then but then after Hot Rats,
by the time you get to
but after Hot Rats,
Sal Marquez,
Yeah, I know Sal. Sal became a good friend of mine. The whole thing
the textures are different.
Yeah, Hot Rats kind of got back to Chunga, which brought us Flo and Eddie again, right?
Well, Hot Rats is a thing unto itself because that was the first album where he was recording on more tracks, and that album was really about Frank and Ian.
Yeah,
Ian defined the flavor of the feel of that music.
Yeah,
and it's like dozens of Ians, many overdubs. And it just
that's right. One of the things that's cool about that I've always liked is that those horns could have been more in tune for Peaches and that kind of stuff.
Right.
But it's not like Winds was Ian's first instrument. But clearly Frank, he liked it. He liked it to be it's a little bit like you could have had Ernie Watts on every track, but I think he actually preferred it to have the imperfections. And it was Ian. I mean, I don't say this as a put down with Ian. I couldn't do that. It was great.
Yeah.
It's a flavor. It's a color.
Well, it is. Stax Records, on the old Atlantic Records reggae albums. That horn is always off just a touch for the tension. It gives you a little tension in the music.
Yeah,
it's like NPR. Let's record our theme. What should it be? Oh, let's hire a klezmer band.
Yeah.
It's so out of tune. That
right.
But it's got flavor.
Yeah, it's the
absolutely.
It adds tension. It adds a little. It is. It's flavored. It adds tension.
It's horrible.
It is. But it works, right? But it works.
It works.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So then after that, he went to the Flo and Eddie. Part of his career, and then when he came out of that, that's when he got serious. That's when when the shit went down, so to speak, and there was no more playing. There really wasn't too much more fun. It all became intense music, and
I would argue that there was fun through the whole process, man.
I wasn't there.
Nothing but fun from start to finish.
I'm telling you, from a listener's standpoint, you had to become deeply involved in Frank's music to really enjoy it from, I'd say, Roxy on. It wasn't something you could put on the turntable and just kick back and listen to. You had to sit down and rip it apart and study it.
Well, I mean, it's everyone receives music differently. I would say that the groove on some of that stuff on Overnight and Roxy and One Size Fits All. The groove is if you let go of the cerebral and the analytical and just go with the texture and the feel of the music, and then Frank and Napoleon and George Duke on stage, just going back and forth.
Yeah, there was a lot of fun
such a good time.
Frank and Napoleon. Napoleon really did bring that,
Yeah. What to me, where the magic is in that stuff is the combination. You've got all that stringent, serious stuff, but at the same time, you've got this real lightness, this real sense of humor. Obviously, there's something. But I mean, that Roxy era band, I think is just a cosmically perfect band for Frank. All those people in that band, and the timbre of that stuff. If you listen to that Roxy concerts, the Roxy performances box that came out a few years ago,
I have
which
a
is
copy of it.
Yeah, I mean, just like strap on a pair of headphones and just live with that. To me, that's Zappa music. That is really, the sound of Frank.
I think Apostrophe was a brilliant album. You do have some light moments on that one. A lot of it is fun.
Yeah.
It's a great album.
And then you get into the bands, the bands that Ed was in. I mean, that first band, essentially the Baby Snakes band, which was the first Zappa band I ever saw. and you've got you've got stringent instrumentals. The very first time I ever heard the Black Page was at that concert.
Really?
And in fact, the
in San Diego.
Yeah, at San Diego State Amphitheater.
That was like the first show. That was the second show.
Yeah,
Tour.
I mean, it was very early on in your guys' history. I saw that gig, and there's the passage in Black Page that goes that is an indelible memory for me. Specifically, Ed playing that line, which happens twice in the song. The dynamics come down a little bit. I remember there was a lighting change, and it seemed like it was just all about Ed playing that melody, and it happened twice.
Really?
And for some reason that memory is an indelible concert going memory, and I hadn't even heard the song before then.
Yeah.
But then they played Punky's Whips, which is like the most ridiculous, hysterical song, also completely insane musically, and we'd never heard this music before. It was mind blowing,
right.
which was always a serious goal of Frank's. He wanted people's minds blown when they came to these shows.
Before I forget, there's two things I want to bring up. Talking about great drummers that played with Frank, I saw Jim Gordon play with Frank. And that was at the Felt Forum, I guess, the Grand Wazoo tour. And talking about, obviously you remember it, that Steve Spanking, that tune. I went to see an attorney in Albuquerque, and that afternoon, while I was seeing her office, Ike Willis called me. This was maybe 3-4 years ago. I was talking to Ike about some stuff. And I said, "Excuse me, I got to take this call." And I told her, and after I got back, I said, there was, she said, "I hope it was important." She had a stick up her butt. I said, "Yeah, that was Ike Willis from one of Frank Zappa's bands." And she said, "Steve Spanking, that girl in that song, is my niece."
Laurel?
Yeah. Yep. Is that funny?
Laurel? Yeah.
Yeah. So. Yeah, so that's pretty funny. How those things happen.
That is funny.
Yeah, so
oh my God.
Yeah, she had to stick up.
It's kind of like Mike and Steve coming from the same town. This, just stuff like that just kind of makes you wonder. The only two people I've been married to come from the exact tiny place in Minnesota, and they don't know each other, and they never did. But the odds are what?
I know.
Yeah. How does that happen?
Wait a second.
That's really interesting.
Okay, Mike, you'll know this. You'll be more in tune with this than Ed is. Do you know a little town in Queens called Laurelton? It's right off the. It's right off the Bell Parkway, Springfield Gardens, Laurelton, Rosedale. You remember Green Acres? The big shopping center. You might have been too young. Anyway,
I was too young. I never met them.
Yeah. I was born in Brooklyn. I was raised in Queens. Then I moved out to Long Island, and in Queens I lived in a town called Laurelton. Anyway, I meet a girl later on, and we go out, we get married, the whole bit. Anyway, she grew up in Laurelton. Never knew her. She was in the same high school as me, the same junior high school as me. Never knew her in Queens. But we hooked up later, and bang. Yeah, so it is weird how these things work out, isn't it?
It is,
In fact, her best friends were in my class. I knew her best friends. I never knew her. So, it's kind
That's bizarre, man.
Yeah, so now we're married for a long time, and I still don't know her. You never know her.
I see what you did there.
Yeah. So anyway, today I listened to your album. I listened to... let me tell you exactly what I had on my turntables today. I listened to the album with hats.
The one that's called Hat?
Yeah, Hat, yeah. That's the album I listened to today, and I really enjoyed it.
Mike, how did you know it was that one?
Yeah. Maybe it was the hint. Hat. Yeah, and you know what I heard? I heard in that. A lot of your music is kind of like the stuff that you're known for when you played in the Zappa bands, when you do the Vice stuff, when you do all that, all that neat stuff.
Oh, that was my first. My first solo album. That's from '92, and so I was just just out of the Zappa thing, and definitely still a huge influence. You know, inevitably he's always going to be an influence, but at that time it was especially raw.
But let me tell you what happened. I put it on. My wife said to me, "Is that Joe Jackson?" There's some stuff in there that has really, really, kind of laid back vocals, and then you go into a Zappa thing and you come back out of it. I thought that was a really, really interesting album. It didn't have a lot of the
it
didn't have a lot of the tech, the pyro stuff in it. It didn't have a lot of the acrobatic stuff in it. It was just a really, really nice album. It had a little bit of everything. I think it's a great, great introductory album to your catalog. And
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I wanted. It was kind of designed to be that, since it was the first album of what I was expecting to be a long, a big catalog. I kind of wanted it to be that sort of introductory thing. So I'm glad it hit you that way.
Yeah, it really did. And my wife is, she was just sitting in the room with me listening, and we listened to stuff. Like I'll pick one out for you. It was pretty much, Eno and the Actor was pretty, a lot of the stuff was pretty neat. It was a really, really pretty album. And then you got into a little of the Zappa type feel to it. A lot of the voicing and things like that. But then I got into the piano.
I was still recording on analog tape then, so I could do sped up voices. Sped up voices don't sound the same.
Yeah, and then the piano reductions was pretty cool too. That was a great, great album too. And
the Steve Vai piano reductions?
Yeah, and the whole thing in that one is, it's a whole different instrument. You put away the guitar and you went to a piano, and just incredible stuff. I mean, there's a lot of talent in your old bones, And
oh man, thank you, Raleigh. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And then I listened to Sluggo for a bit. I kind of did a quick rundown of some of his stuff while I was listening today, and. Personally, my favorite stuff is the stuff that's not as it doesn't have that. Not that it doesn't have the Vai feel, that type of feel to it. But when you get down and really get down to that instrument, and you and an instrument, you do some really, really beautiful work. Not that the other stuff isn't, but that's the stuff I really got into. And
just the more playing oriented.
Yeah,
stuff.
The real nice playing stuff, the acoustic stuff, the piano stuff, the actual. Maybe because I'm an older guy and I can't take that fast music. No, I'm just fooling. I'm not.
Oh, I am. I'm pretty old too. Probably grew up liking a lot of the same music.
Yeah. But I'm saying, it was that kind of a thing. That's the stuff I really. Just the stuff that comes out of you. You could you pretty much could pull anything off, and that's incredible.
No, I appreciate it. It's just that I love music a lot. And I love all kinds of different music, and it all makes its way in there. And I try to make each record good, so I appreciate that, man.
Cool, and doing a great job. Now, I know you're going to hate this question, but Frank Zappa, how did you get involved? I've read the story.
Frank?
Yeah, I've read the stories. I heard about your brother driving you to the rehearsals, and
right.
I think some of our listeners.
Yeah, it's definitely, the stories are out there. But essentially, I called him up. I called his office and asked for a job. It was, and he had always said that his band was the only, world-renowned, world-class band that it wasn't really reliant upon who you know. It's like, obviously it's good when you can get an introduction if you have a friend of a friend who knows somebody. Right. But really, Frank was always just about finding people who could play the stuff. If there was anybody out there that could play the stuff he was writing, he wanted to know about it. It really didn't have anything to do with what sort of a career they had built up.
Right.
So I was just lucky that the time that I called and offered my services was at a time where he was looking for people that could do what I did. And, I just had the good fortune to call at a time and say, hey, my name's Mike. I play guitar and keyboard and I sing, and I'm a huge fan of Frank's. I have a lot of his stuff committed to memory. I'm familiar with all of his work, and I don't know if he's looking for anybody, but if he is, I'm here. And he was just in need at the time of a guitarist and a keyboardist and another voice. So it was just kind of weird fortuitous that happened to be the week that I called, offering to do all three of those things. So it's kind of like what Ed was saying, that it's like a little bit strange how things go down sometimes, but it really was.
But Mike, you that when you came in was when Ray had decided he wasn't going to do it. Frank was holding on for a decision, and it took Ray a while, but when he finally said, "No, I'm not going to do it," I mean, you called at just the right time.
I know.
If you called a week earlier, he would have thought, "Nah, Ray's going to do this."
And honestly, my first, I don't remember exactly how long, but like the first week and a half I was there, it was under the understanding that if Ray returned, I was out of there. So it was.
Isn't that great? That happened to me my first year. Oh, Ruth, she wants me back in the band, but I just don't know what I'm going to do here. But hey, go have a good rehearsal. Okay, Frank.
Wow.
So that's a weird vibe to be trying to
it is.
practice
it's
music under.
You can't feel committed. It's like it's so tentative.
Wow.
Exactly.
Yeah, that helps you get to a rehearsal with a clear conscience and no pressure. Wow.
There's already so much fear running when Frank is in.
So Mike, did you ever? You must have run into Ray a few times, right?
I really didn't. The first time I met Ray was when he was doing a tour with Zappa Plays Zappa in 2006 or something.
Okay.
I went to the show and talked to him for maybe 20 seconds backstage, and then the first time, the only time that I really got to know Ray was when the day we walked into rehearsals with Ed. To start the Bizarre World of Frank Zappa thing.
Wow.
And it's
really? I didn't know that.
That was it. I mean, really, that was when Ray and I first connected. Was the first day of rehearsals for that.
Ray's a great guy. Ray's a lot of fun.
Yeah, he is.
Ray's amazing.
Beautiful musician, obviously unbelievable vocalist, and a wonderful guy.
Yeah.
He's such a thinker. His concepts. Just his posts. He makes these 1.5 or 2 sentence posts on Facebook, and it's like, whoa, man! Which Moses tablet did you get that from?
Yeah,
he's very incisive. He doesn't waste time, and he says exactly the truth every time.
No, I was always embarrassed.
Really eloquent.
I was always embarrassed to ask Ray this question, but it's printed all over. No, it's not a secret. Did he actually leave Frank's band due to? He thought the band was a little too wild. I never heard that it didn't fit in with his religious, background and stuff.
No, that was Chester. That's Chester.
No, I read that on Ray's actually, but it could.
Well, maybe it's Ray too.
Yeah, it could. Could be.
Chester made a statement, and also, that he wouldn't do it anymore in any form because of his beliefs.
Yeah, because when I spoke to Ray, speaking to Ray, he sounded like a wild guy. He sounded like he'd like to have a little fun.
Ray?
Yeah, Ray is like he makes the stage fun.
Yeah,
exactly. Ray is fun.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Ike is a great foil. Ike can sit there and improvise and do setups that are just perfect for Frank.
Yeah.
Man, when you think about the 88 band, the 1988 band, the combination of Ike being Ike, the fact that he felt, seized and utilized that freedom to just do these vocal interjections and make Frank laugh and stuff, and then combine that with what Ed was doing with the sampled sounds on the Silicon Mallets. The constant commentary, this constant, Negative Land style audio tapestry being woven that Ed is spontaneously producing every night. It was the mixture of that kind of thing, the episodes of complete improvisation that would happen in the midst of this very structured show. I mean, that's why I think that 12-piece band was a really special band, because it had a completely interesting combination of prepared, disciplined stuff, completely spontaneous stuff, and an approach to the sonics, and it was new territory, you know. That was pretty crazy stuff.
Yep. So I'm reading it in front of me now. According to Frank Zappa, White, who is deeply religious, was uncomfortable with the aesthetic views of some of the other band members, which led to his departure.
So that's according to Frank.
Yeah, according to Frank.
Okay, so that's the Frank version of the truth.
What is the statement?
It said, according to Frank Zappa, Ray left the band due to the aesthetic beliefs of the other band members, you know, at the time.
The aesthetic beliefs?
Aesthetics, yep.
I would left. Well, who knows? Nobody can speak for Ray. I'm sure it's true.
No,
you have to ask him for what it really means.
Yeah.
That is correct. Because that sounds to me like somebody else's interpretation of Frank's interpretation of what Ray really was thinking. You know,
okay,
you really want to ask Ray.
Yeah. Because I spoke to Frank for hours, and I spoke to Ray for hours, and he seems as crazy as all the rest of us. You know, it was like
Ray.
Well, dude, we contain multitudes, man.
In 81, 82, we were doing nigger business.
Yeah.
And you know, for some reason, Frank's the only person who can get away with doing that. He could probably get away with doing it now.
Yeah, he probably could.
But Ray, you know, who used to be a Black Panther, he would be the first person to, no, you know, but he understood the context, and he didn't have a problem with it.
Right. Okay.
He sang lead, you know, on the tune. And so, I think
I would really love to have the conversation with Ray about how he really felt about singing that. But you know, it was unquestionably different times.
Yeah, it was.
And I know. I've talked with him enough about it to know that it wasn't just like, well, this is the job, so I'll do it.
No, I'm sure of that.
It wasn't that, or he wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, that's unquestionably true.
Yeah.
There are psychic layers to situations like that, and you know, it's as with anything.
Right. And so, Mike, you're still dedicated to the whole Frank Zappa thing. That's your passion at this point. I know you're doing thousands of other side projects and everything else.
I would not to disagree, but I'm not sure I agree with your thesis statement.
Just setting himself up there.
Well, no. Yeah, no. You know, who else is going to ask this stupid question but me? You know, I mean, I know
that's why we're here. Man.
Yeah, I know.
I love Frank Zappa's music, but I can't state with honesty that it's my primary passion, just because I'm so deeply involved with the stuff that I'm writing.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you're doing tons of stuff. You've worked with everybody. You've you have the metal bands. You have everything else going on, but there has to be a place in your heart where you kind of have this fondness for Frank.
Oh my God! I mean, I adore Frank. You know,
and now this is, and now I feel like the Matador. Here's where I come in for the kill.
All right.
What I spoke to,
I can handle it.
Yeah, no. I spoke to tons and tons of Zappa alumni and Mothers people and everything else. I've spoken to Ed about this, and to Ike, and to Don Preston and Ian and everybody. Everybody seems to love Frank as a musician. But did you consider him to be a friend of yours, or somebody who you could actually kind of relate to outside of the art world, the music world?
Well, I mean, I was very young when I got in the band. I had hero worship stuff to get past, and never really did during his lifetime. I loved him, but he at least openly didn't consider himself as conducting friendships. He said that wasn't a real priority for him. So I felt.
I'm sorry. What did he, Mike? What did he call it?
friendship as a concept wasn't like a major priority for him, and he claimed, sometimes he would get into a specific mindset sometimes in an interview where he would just say, "I don't have friends." Right. And
I know, man. I'll tell you what. Ouch! Yeah. That's fucking good. Because I was interested to hear Elliot say, or just relate what Ian had told him, was just that no, Frank wasn't ever your friend.
Right.
I was really surprised to hear that from Ian.
Yeah, you were online. You see, Ed, you were online with me when I spoke to Ian, right?
No, I wasn't.
Oh, you heard it. Okay, I sent you the clips.
You told him.
Yeah. Ian said that Frank never had friends. He said Frank just wasn't.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, from Ian.
But he was a much younger man when he was in the band, and very driven in a specific kind of way. And I imagine he might have been a little colder. I think by the time Ed got in the band, and certainly by the time I got in the band, he was a warmer individual.
Well, you see, even
I think it went the other way.
I do too.
You think he got colder?
I think he did.
Well, like in '77, when I joined. It wasn't just true of me, it's true of Tommy, Peter Wolf, Adrian, and Patrick and Terry, that we thought of him as a friend, and we behaved and gave as though he was really a friend. But it wasn't consistent. It wasn't equilateral.
Mm-hmm.
It was, the only way do Frank's music was to be his friend and accept those friendly moments from him where he would act as your friend. But I at least had to understand it didn't go both ways. With him, it was conditional. For us, it had to be unconditional. You had to give of yourself as an unconditional friend, regardless. That means after suddenly he ignores you for 2 or 3 days, or he just turns on you, in some weird ways, whatever, something happens, that after that, you still love him. And, but for Frank, the way he operated was, I'm your friend, and then he'd do like an interview where he says, I have no friends. And man, I can tell you for all of us, like in that 77, 78 band, 78, 79 band, that hurt. Everybody in the band would just be like, oh, crestfallen. He said that, because it kind of rocked your world, And I didn't figure out the conditional, unconditional, mutual,
right.
Two different ways that had to be adhered to until after, really, like after 88 and everything. That, nobody quit in 88, despite how miserable it was, because they loved Frank. Right. Even though he had done a lot of stuff that wasn't kind, but in the end,
right.
You loved him. But he didn't, I speak only for myself now, he didn't necessarily love you all the time. He would turn it on and off depending upon what he needed, and mercurial.
You see, the old mothers felt he was friends, and that's why I think they felt so bad when he broke the band up, that there was no notice, there was no end gamer, so to speak, like the Prestons and the Gardners and the not Ian so much. Ian worked with Frank for a couple of years.
That's why I was surprised to hear Ian say that. Like Frank didn't have friends, just straight out without even thinking about it. I
think Ian had a pretty good. I have a feeling Ian had a pretty good insight into Frank's psyche.
I did
Ian's
too.
Very perceptive person.
Really, really cool, the way.
So I would say that even when Frank was acting the most like a friend act, that Ian would still perceive that. Distance is one word to use, but it's just the reality of the dynamic of the situation.
Depending on it, I agree with you.
Well, Mike, do you think that when Ruth got involved, the dynamics changed a bit?
Ruth is just provides her own kind of magic, right? As a musician and as a person.
I mean, as a person, just the whole relationship between band members and things like that. I know.
I was never in the band at the same time as Ruth, so I can't say. I can only provide my perspective on it the same way you can provide yours. Sure. But it seems to me, yes, that, anything that she was involved with, she definitely had some kind of catalyzing impact on.
Yeah, I wonder if that had anything to do with the Ian Frank type, thing at the end. I don't know.
I know from hanging out with Ruth like once or twice a week for the 3 months before I joined the band, and I guess anyway, at least from that she approached it like I did. We never spoke about this because I didn't figure it out until a lot later than that. But that she was always willing to forgive Frank and be his friend. But it was different for her because when it got to be too much, she could always quit, and she did.
Yeah.
And Frank hated that. Like, she didn't need the money, in other words. She didn't have to work. So she would quit, and then she'd join, and quit, and then join, and and that kind of thing. And I would only speak to this if because I was present for the first recording sessions that John Bergamo and I did with Ruth at the record plant with Frank. And Frank was constantly razzing Ruth, or he was just saying, percussionist is great in the studio, but never hire him in the band. Never take him on the road because you never know when they're going to quit. And at the time, I didn't really know what to make of any of that. I just took it at face value. Okay, don't hire a percussionist, fine. Doesn't bother me. I'm not looking for a job. But he was pointing it at Ruth. And so, anyway, the reason I say this is because Ruth had a certain freedom to retain. She couldn't be manipulated in that way because of it's a job. And I don't know how much that plays into her dynamic with Frank or not. There was obviously a lot of, attraction and sexual tension and stuff, and she really assumed the Zappa identity. You can see that in photos, band photos. But she always, from what she told me, she always she looked past the difficult parts, always to just thinking of Frank as a friend. She really thought of Frank as a friend.
There's so much power connected to the fact that she didn't have to be there. She didn't approach it as that kind of a job. So that's always going to put you in a place of feeling confident in a way.
Kind of empowered a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, she was in the band after Ian left, right? She was kind of like the last Underwood standing. So
no, they did. I think they did. They did a year and a half or so together.
Yeah, but then she stayed, right?
And then
and he left.
Well, she was gone by 1974, right?
Yeah, she wasn't on any of the 75, 76 stuff. That is correct.
Okay.
Then she came back for the New York shows in 76.
Right. And then that was
a great photo with Ray. That's such a good, oh
yeah, that's beautiful.
And
they look so happy.
That photo, man, her and Ray, that's such a great shot.
It really is. It's a great moment.
Okay, so you actually did the Hologram Tour, right?
Yeah, we both of us.
Yeah, both of you guys did, but Mike, you were there with Ed. And what was your... did you like that tour? Scott said he loved it. Scott Tuna said he enjoyed working with Frank every night, and he loved playing Apostrophe with Frank every night. Was it as fulfilling for you guys as it was for Scott?
It was very surreal, and
it was very surreal.
Yeah, and it was. At times, it was incredibly powerful. There's no doubt that I've never been a part of anything else that was anything like it.
Sometimes I wonder if we were affected by all of that EMF coming off those screens. You know, so much EMF coming off.
Do you glow at night?
No, but I mean, it's a huge amount of all the wrong kind of EMF. And if I had a meter then, I wasn't even thinking about that stuff then, but I wish I did have a meter then and measure it, because I know it was a lot. You know, that kind of screen, whatever that kind of screen is called.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because there was an electric feeling up on stage, and it could have been generated from any number of sources.
Right, and it could make, usually that stuff kind of makes it hard for people to feel totally grounded and just settled in what they're doing.
Right.
It was that kind of, it was the kind of show where you had to, get acclimated to the idea that you are kind of part of a machine.
Yeah.
And once you find your place of comfort within that machine, it was, for me anyway, in my experience, it was very easy to get carried away. It was very easy to feel lifted up into like the arms of this, this technological beast. And for me,
man, you must have been really right in the way of the beam. It got you.
It got me big time. But for me, it was a tremendously enjoyable experience. It felt very powerful, musically and emotionally.
Yeah.
So and I was gratified to look out in the audience and see a majority of people in the audience being moved by it. It was a controversial tour, and it generated a lot of chatter. But to me, it kind of came down to two things. It really moved a lot of the people who experienced the thing,
sure.
and I think that at its heart, it's something that I think Frank would have been very interested in. The idea of this kind of an entertainment event, this kind of a presentation using that technology.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah,
I do too. Now, did you play with Ian Underwood at the Potato?
Yes, Ed wasn't able to make those gigs, but Ian did.
Yeah, you played those.
But yes, and Ian came and he played the Black Page.
Yes,
which was beautiful.
Just an FYI, that was one of the highlights, he said, in his post-Zappa career, that he felt so honored to have been able to do that with you guys. Yep.
Well, that's very sweet. That's like, it was ridiculous to meet him and to play with him. I can't overstate the importance of the stuff that he played on like Uncle Meat and We're Only in It for the Money. Both of those albums are total life building, much less changing albums for me.
And Burnt Weenie.
And Burnt Weenie, of course, yeah. Yep. The solo piano stuff that he does on that, and the absurd, all the talk about just intonation not being the point. The stuff like those sax ensembles on Holiday in Berlin.
Right.
That's unbelievable. The sound of that. And and just his alto sax solo on Ian Underwood whips it out on Uncle Meat.
Sure.
That's that's vast, deep saxophone
playing. Yeah, it really is. And he was a very humble guy.
Yeah, I was just going to.
Truly.
I was going to say that. Him, 5 decades later, 6 decades later, you talk to him, and he still sounds like the young kid on. Yeah, hi, I want to join your group. That same voice, that same demeanor. Yeah. Hey, wow, I'm here, and how the heck did I get here? That kind of thing. And
yeah, that's right. That kind of a wonderment to it all.
Yeah, he told me
when I met him. It's when I was hanging out with Ruth.
Uh-huh.
We had done the recording sessions, and we just became friends. So we were hanging out a lot. And I got there one day, and Ian was in the living room with a synthesizer, learning how to work it because he was starting to get studio work, and it was coming through that. And so Ruth said, "Oh, Ian, I'd like you to meet my friend Ed." And Ian, he kind of walks over and he goes, "Hi, I'm Ian."
I know.
And I'm thinking oh God, this is I can't match your level of humble.
Right.
I mean, I'm like shaking in my shoes.
Yeah.
And he's going, "Oh, hi, I'm Ian."
Okay,
I know.
Here's a Jeopardy question. Does anybody know the first soundtrack he played on?
No, it wasn't Apocalypse.
Nah, you're not even close. It was the Mod Squad.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
That's very hip.
was James Horner involved with that too?
No. Quincy Jones was part of that whole setup.
Oh, there you go.
Because Quincy's
Did
wife.
he play?
Yeah, Ian did the synthesizer work on that.
He played.
What a trip.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
Horner.
Just about the last meal that I had in public before I went on the Devin Townsend tour last year that got called off in the middle of it because of COVID.
Yeah.
So like early January, it was like right when we were doing the last Baked Potato shows, the Zappa band, and Ian came and sat in with us, and me and Joe Travers met Ian and his family and a bunch of friends of theirs at this farmers market in Los Angeles for breakfast on Sunday morning.
Oh.
And when I think of that now, just the idea of like sitting at a table with a bunch of people around and eating, it's like it's unthinkable.
It was made illegal.
Yeah,
I know. I've been in the house now for God knows how many months. I actually went to the dentist. I went to the dentist today. And it was like going to, it was like escaping. So I know what I have to do next time. I want to get out of the house. I have to break my bridge again so I could get out of that damn house.
There you go.
It was like, wow.
Get out, man.
Yeah,
the whole thing.
Yeah, sitting in the car was like was like a surreal experience.
I know. I've been home since March 13th. I've just been sitting here since March 13th. It's crazy. Yep. So anyway, that's just mind blowing. Thinking of the last time I just like not counting when I was on the road for a couple of weeks.
Sure.
But like one of the last times I just hung out eating with some people was Ian, and he's just so sweet, He's and funny and cool, and Ruth came to see us at the Baked Potato, and that's the only time I've met Ruth. And it was it was wonderful because after the show I was standing there with some other people and she was talking and she was like regarding the fact that I was there but didn't recognize me from the fact that I had just played.
Wow.
And suddenly she just turns and maybe it was something that somebody had said and she looked at me and she like pointed at the stage and she pointed at me and then she took my face in her hands and it was just like, you motherfucker,
Wow.
And it turned into a beautiful moment.
Wow.
She was very sweet.
That's great. Beautiful. Well,
it's a great thing when a Jewish woman loves you. I'm telling you.
Yeah. Up to a point. Up to a point.
Okay. That's a great title, Ed.
Yeah. Up to a point. Yeah.
I have a Jewish wife, or had a Jewish wife, so.
Who did?
I'm not just saying it.
Who's that, Ed?
Or it gets me, yeah.
Yeah, I have one for 4.5 decades. How do you get rid of them?
There you go.
How do you get rid of them?
Stop it.
I'm just fooling. I'm just fooling.
Come on, Laura,
I know, Laura's my... I know, I can't do anything without that woman. What are you doing outside of this whole Zappa thing? I know you have your own life, your own music career.
I've been, I got off the road last year. I was out on the road with Devin Townsend,
right?
And because I co-produced his last record, and I did his last couple of tours, and of course all touring stopped. So I went home and tried to figure out next steps. I looked at where things were standing and realized that I needed help.
It's too much like Joe's Garage.
But so I ended up doing a GoFundMe, which allowed me to start a studio here in my home.
Oh wow!
And so ever since last April or so, I've just been recording here nonstop, and I've been working on my solo record when I can. But I've also I'm part of this group called MFTJ. It's me and a producer named Scott Shore, and we just put out our second album, which is called My Mom's Getting a Horse, and that's some very unusual instrumental music. I'm doing a project with this composer named Bear McCreary. He's written the soundtrack music for Battlestar Galactica and Walking Dead and a million other shows and movies.
Okay.
And he's doing a project, and I'm right now like nonstop working on that. I did a couple of Devin Townsend albums last month. I'm producing this instrumental group called the Android Trio, who are really brilliant, just beautiful players. I'm signing off on their final mixes this week. There's another songwriter named Steve McAllister. He hired me and Dave Gregory from XTC to play on some songs that he's doing. So it's just like a lot of projects.
You've also did something with Andy Partridge, didn't you?
Yeah, and Andy and Andy and Dave from XTC came to see the Zappa tour in 1988. They came to the Birmingham show, and backstage afterwards, Scott Tunis and I, ended up just like connecting with Andy and Dave, and while they were working on the album Oranges and Lemons in LA, later that I guess it was late '88 into '89. Tunis and I would just go attend their recording sessions whenever we could. Cool. And then Andy and I ended up working on an album of mine called Wingbeat Fantastic. It was a solo album of mine, but 2/3 of the songs we wrote together.
Yep.
So that's I love Andy's writing. Obviously, it's unbelievable.
Yeah,
he's a major influence on my writing. If you listen to that Sluggo album, there's like deep influences. And actually, there's a quote from an XTC song on that album hat that you listen to. There's a song called Day of the Cow that quotes Mayor of Simpleton, which is an XTC piece. Yep. So yeah, I'm a huge fan.
I was working with a band back in the early '80s. Ed Michael Shreve's band, Novo Combo.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, when I bought that first album, XTC's first album, and they had just named the band Novo Combo, but he said if I would have seen that title, Drums and Wires, that's a brilliant name for any band.
It is, and it was like a beautiful description of the way that band sounded, because it was just like all really edgy, clean, Telecaster type sounds, and although it wasn't Telecasters, but just that kind of bite, and then all the drums were just like very upfront and tribal. Well, that was Hugh Padgham engineering, Steve Lillywhite producing in 1979, and 2 years later that was all over the sounds of Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins, and that kind of drum approach started with the stuff they did with XTC.
I love that tune, "You Kill Me" from the Wingbeat album. Great tune.
Oh man, that's like all Andy's lyrics. Yeah. That's like it's so Andy Partridge, those words.
Yeah, that's a great album, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, you have so many different fires going that you could pick just about any one and spend months in it. And
after a short break, the guys return with their take on this whole COVID mess.
Just a mention of the word COVID is like fills me with dread.
It's like it's like taking a cold shower, right? Where your testicles go, right? Every time you mention that word, it's like it ruins it.
I prefer a cold shower any day. It's like it's a terrifying year, really.
It's quite unbelievable.
Yeah, it is
quite unbelievable.
It really is. And
my whole year has been I'm connected with my daughter. That's why I'm here in Denver. She's 26. So pretty much the sole focus, with a few exceptions, has just been doing what I can for her to help her get through this, suddenly with no concerts to go through, or to, and you're not allowed to gather publicly, and it's all isolated. I mean, I can't imagine doing that when I was 26. I wouldn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And so that's been the sole focus of my attention.
But you know what? It's hard for the young kids, but they see their way out of it. How about guys like us, who kind of,
That's my therapist says.
Yeah, how about guys like us? We're not kids anymore, and we just gave up a year of our life.
Well, for me, like we're about the same age, Elliot.
Yeah.
Growing up in the 60s, this is like everything we ever dreaded.
Right.
It's like, no. And it's so much like Joe's Garage. And, you know, I mean, I love Frank, but I understand Frank. And, but he knew a lot from his father. He knew who was, you know, secret chemical weapons development for the Air Force, top level. And, in fact, working in that Air Force base at the top of Laurel Canyon, after, being out at Edwards. But he used to tell us a lot of stuff. I don't think I told Mike this, so I'll do it here. It was like 1978 or something. All of a sudden, Frank, hey, come here. And he says, if anybody from the government ever comes to you and wants to put a long swab way up into the top of your sinus cavity, don't let them do it. That's it. That's what, you know, it's like, it had no context. There was no reason for him to say that. He just said it all of a sudden. And
he had that done to him when he was a little kid.
Right. And he told me the story later, you know, when I asked about it. And I had forgotten about it and wasn't even thinking about it until this first type of testing came about. Wow. And all of a sudden I thought, oh my God. I mean, Frank predicted so much stuff so accurately.
Well, and, you know, no one could have predicted the arrival of the virus, man. You know, but it's what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You know, you got to. But to me, it's all just been about. Yeah, I mean, this has been an unbelievable year. That is true, but it happened, and I'm
so many parallels. You know, is the thing. So I don't know. I just think it's interesting. You know.
Yeah. It is. It's fascinating. It's ridiculous. But I'm choosing. You know, I'm a hippie at heart. I'm choosing to just look at this as a forced reboot. Well, and just as, you know, like so much about the last 4 years was ridiculous. But at the same time, you might say that it was the kind of wake up call that was required.
Right. I've heard a lot of people say that too. Yeah.
Well, do you think this was nature's way of kind of taking back some of her magic, so to speak?
I don't know if nature had a specific agenda in mind. I wouldn't anthropomorphize it to that extent. Well, I just honestly think it's something that happened.
I'm in New Mexico, and you can't believe the coyotes and the rabbits and the other animals running around that were kind of scarce there for a while. And it just seems that the air out there is cleaner. Everything seems to be.
Certainly there are cycles to things, and there is balance to things, and you know, the other thing that Frank used to say was the universe works whether you understand it or not.
Sure.
And I do honestly think that in some way there's reasons for things to go down the way they did, but I'm not going to stand behind that. I'm definitely not going to swear to it in court. Right. But ultimately, what is true is that here we are. It's today. It's now. The things that have happened, and I do think that as far as the thing about we're all stuck at home for a year, and we have to wear masks when we go out and all that. I just choose to look at that as kindness. And if COVID is a real thing, which it is, and if we don't perfectly understand it, which we don't, I think it makes a lot of sense to stay home until I'm personally, I'm going to get the fuck vaccinated out of me. You know what I mean? I'm definitely getting vaccinated. And there's never going to be normal life again. You know, once everything goes back to, quote, normal, it's not going to be normal. Everything's been changed.
Yeah, it'll never be.
Do you guys are familiar with 1984, right?
Sure.
Okay. Do you think we're in the middle of it, or definitely influenced by it?
No. Yeah, I think that what 1984 about is gullibility. And I think that, what we have just seen is that there are many people who are willing to believe absolute bullshit because it bolsters their belief systems, and because they're desperate to hang on to a way of thinking that their father passed on to them. And I honestly think that like since the election, I see signs of like people snapping out of hypnosis here and there. Like people who believe so strongly in something and now can see that a lot of it was a sham. And
that's a good thing.
I do honestly feel like we did need something like the kick in the ass, which has been and continues to be what's going on in the world right now.
Mm-hmm.
But and I really honestly am just like kind of giddy when I imagine how things are going to be post all of this, because to just be like microcosmic about it, imagine the first gig back, when we're actually able to start doing gigs again and for real with people in the room and stuff like that.
I know it's going to seem like, otherworldly.
Yeah, it really will. And I also think that there's going to be a feeling of such shared, good fortune. Like none of us are going to be able to believe it, and it's going to be a very powerful thing for the performers and the audience alike to share.
And I think that people in general will never have been more appreciative of community when that happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's good. That's good.
That's really good.
They're either going to appreciate it or they're not going to know how to deal with it. I have two of my grandkids.
Both things are interesting.
Yeah. Two of my grandkids live with me, an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old. Now, my 8-year-old is in second grade. These kids aren't going to know how to socialize. These kids have no idea what it's like playing with kids anymore. The 11-year-old is
right. They've lost a year at a very young age,
and it's an important year.
Right.
The 11-year-old is can't wait to get back to school. He wants to, the second grader is afraid. He doesn't want to leave the house. He has to.
Oh wow!
I had never thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, he heard too much about Trump. He heard too much about COVID. He heard too much about people dying. He has to wear a mask every time he goes outside. He has to,
Right.
I mean, this isn't normal for a 7-8-year-old. And
fear can be a really warping thing.
Yeah, and how about the kids younger than him? The kids that never were in a school yet. The kids who were supposed to start kindergarten, who were supposed to start like first grade. These kids have no idea what the real world, is like.
It's going to be a shock to the system. Absolutely.
That's really true, man. I mean,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You remember how long a year seemed when we were 5, 6, 7 years old?
Yeah.
Yes. You're right.
It was a real long time.
Christmas to Thanksgiving to Christmas seemed like a year.
Right.
Yeah, the summer seemed like 5 years.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, and these poor kids have no idea what it's like to be around other kids. I mean, I have kids living next door to me too, and every now and then you'll see a head pop up over the fence, but over the gate, and that's it. That's all they have, and it's scary as crap. It really is. And
I'm glad you mentioned that, man, because that's something important to think about.
Yeah. And the whole thing, the whole thing with 1984 is, if you remember, in 1984, everybody was drinking cheap state, vodka. You remember they all had that cheap vodka.
Right.
Now they kind of open up the dispensaries for everybody. Stay home, stay stoned, stay whatever. And
here they close the dispensaries for 6 hours, and the whole city was fucking nuts.
Right.
And now, no, we're not closing the dispensaries. Well, we take that one back. And I mean, it's just funny, but
I'm all for legalizing marijuana, but think about that too. They're doping up the kids now. They're just kind of numbing everybody to sit home and shut up. First it was video games.
Well, there is a part of that. I think if you look at the whole thing, there's a lot of things that are true. It's not mutually exclusive for any one of them. And if you, this Rahm Emanuel quote comes to mind for me, which is, never let a good crisis go to waste.
Right.
So, whereas this thing is, I too believe it's a genuine contagious illness. I don't know how it happened, but it just is. And but then I think there are factions that are kind of like, oh, good, we need that, and they've been talking about this for a long time. We need that Pearl Harbor moment. So, I see it's not as simple as one solid answer. There's a bunch of things running, but
that's true. The dynamics of it all are just crazy.
Keep in mind, like what the end goal, so you don't get caught up in emotional trauma that stops your forward movement.
And of course, that is more difficult for a 5-year-old. Obviously, that's a tall order. That's very sad. But
my daughter
eventually they will emerge. Eventually, we'll all emerge from this, and that's going to be a powerful thing for those kids too. So, life is.
They're going to be different kind of kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
Than they would have been if this didn't happen. And
just like a child of World War II is different, absolutely.
Yeah, right. And I have a really good friend in Israel, and she's just deep. I mean, she knows a lot, she sees a lot, and she called me and said, "Don't worry, your daughter she can handle this. It's her generation that's going to make things different."
Okay,
and you're seeing her like you, but she has more.
Well, let me interrupt a second. I interviewed an author a week or two ago. He wrote the last John Lennon book. His name is Kevin Womack. He wrote John Lennon, whatever, the final days, whatever the hell it was. And he's a professor in a college. And he told me the same thing, Ed. He said that the kids today don't take shit from anybody, that they're out there fighting. They're not going to let the abortion laws get changed. They're not going to let the racist thing come back. They're not going to let this whole, the whole LGBTQ thing take a back seat again. He said these kids are so involved, and he said, they're not.
They really are.
Yeah, he said they're not happy going home at night and making a hamburger for dinner. They'll make themselves a 3-4 course dinner because they were raised on the Food Network, that kind of thing. That they don't drink Budweiser anymore. They only drink the finest beers they can get their hands on, that kind of thing. He said they are so...
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is. He said cable TV and everything else that these kids were raised on kind of sunk in, and they're not the same generation, not the same type of people that we were as kids in the generations that we grew up in, because they have so much more knowledge at their fingertips, and they're using it.
Sure.
It kind of made me feel...
Well, that's the positive side.
Yeah.
One thing that's been really difficult for my daughter, who's 26, is that, she had a big, I guess she still has, a big community of friends here in Denver.
Right.
But most of them, during this whole thing, have refused, to hang out. They're too scared. Mm-hmm. And she's not like that, really. She's like, yeah... It's important to, do the stuff, wear the mask, sanitize, all this stuff. And but the isolation part's been really hard on her. Just seeing nobody, for
sure.
this long a time. So it's disturbed me a little bit that her peer group is so scared, terrified, that they're being so strict with themselves. Maybe it's right, maybe it's not right, I don't know. But just, it is. It's a thing. And it's difficult, for that, for them on that level.
Well,
absolutely. I mean, it's especially if I know how fortunate I am. I'm here with my wife. We really have a good time together. It's being in lockdown with her is really about as good a situation as I can envision. I hate the fact that I don't see my kid. I haven't seen my kid in forever because they live across town, and there's aspects about this that absolutely suck, but in general, I'm very happy at home. So I'm in an unusually fortunate position in terms of being able to cope with lockdown, and I do realize that.
You are, man. But I think having anybody else in your house. My daughter was here for the first few months, and it was so much better than when she found her own place. Then it's been really difficult being all alone.
Yes.
But it's not like it hasn't been useful. You have to, dig deep and find stuff and kind of get settled with things that you are subconsciously not settled with. But so it's not like it's not useful, but it's being
challenging as fuck. Yeah,
in a really big way. So you're blessed to have your wife there with you, you know, and
absolutely,
that's really good. Mm-hmm. I'm just hoping, you know, it's like I was encouraged when I saw some dates showing up as like publicized dates. So and so will be appearing, and it's late summer. That a promoter has the confidence,
right,
to book it. You know,
yeah. It's you have to, right? You have to start to believe that these things can happen.
Yeah, but for a promoter, you know, look how much stuff was booked, and all of a sudden had to be canceled.
Yeah.
I know.
Imagine the totality of it in numbers, dollars, you know, billions. I know my whole summer, last summer I had a big summer schedule, but it was all canceled. And I know you did too, Mike. And so just for the industry to have the confidence to say, I trust that this date's going to happen, and it's scheduled for like late August, is huge.
It is, but you're also kind of like backed against the wall. If the gig is going to happen, you have to treat it as though it's going to happen. Otherwise, everybody's going to be completely unprepared when suddenly it turns out, yes, everybody's vaccinated, we can start doing shows again. Stuff
but it's
needs
also presuming that the government is not going to, without, you know, on very fast notice, lay down another lockdown. Yeah, that part they have to presume. A promoter.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean because the rules are being rewritten daily. But you know, it is like surprising that a promoter would put themselves at such risk. But these are unprecedented times, you know.
They are.
Every day is like a decision. Every day is a decision. Sure. Okay, are we gonna move forward as though things will be fine or not? And part of a way of coping from day to day is to assume that things eventually are going to be fine.
Okay, let me pull us out of this doldrum. Mike, I read that you're a big Beetle fan.
Truth.
Okay, Ed, big Beetle fan?
Huge.
Okay, best Beetle album.
For me, Rubber Soul U.S. version.
Okay. Ed?
Yeah, I don't have a favorite because they change so quickly.
Well,
you know.
mine happens to be Revolver. I love Revolver. I think Revolver's a brilliant album, only because
that's a beautiful era.
Yeah, I think that was kind of gave the Beatles permission to go in any direction they wanted to. You know,
what year was that?
Right after Rubber Soul. Yeah, 66. Rubber Soul is a beautiful album too. Rubber Soul.
It's like precisely what you said, that they gave themselves the freedom.
Yeah.
Rubber Soul is really where you can, in retrospect, feel that coming through there,
right?
But it was in a more understated way,
safe.
And also
it was safer.
Well, I mean, to me, it's just beautiful music.
It is.
And it's also primarily acoustic, the U.S. version especially.
Yes.
So that's really like a Beatles folk album.
Uh-huh.
And I just think that as a collection of songs and as just like a sonic thing, it's just heavenly. I really love that record.
Yeah, you see, Revolver, I thought, kind of opened up the floodgates. Not only did it give them permission,
so much more experimental.
Yeah, not only did it give them permission to do what they wanted to do, but it gave all the bands that kind of followed them. Tomorrow Never Knows, She Said, just incredible music on that album as well. Great experimental stuff that you've never heard before. Now, let's go back to...
they were just...
You go.
They were just blazing trails, ridiculously. It was insane the amount of ground they covered and how quickly they did. Yeah. I mean... fucking 3 years from like the first two Beatles albums, and then it's 3 years later is Revolver, and then a year later is Sgt. Pepper. You know, that's 3.5 years from I Want to Hold Your Hand to Sgt. Pepper.
Incredible.
That just doesn't happen. It's crazy.
And how about solo work?
Well, I mean, that's for me the John Lennon Plastic Ono Band album with Mother and God on it.
Yeah, a lot of people give me that one. How about you, Ed?
Well, I have to back up from that because I've read this book, The Memoirs of Billy Shears.
Right.
And I went into it thinking like, yeah, right. Yeah, okay, I'll read it, But, I don't know. There's some interesting stuff, like from, I think it's Sgt. Pepper's is where it started. Is Sgt. Pepper's the first album where there's vaudevillian stylistic things?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's safe to say, yeah.
Yeah.
I think so, too.
Well, I think the greatest solo Beetle album was All Things Must Pass.
Well, I was going to say that one too. I didn't know you were going to come.
Harrison, right? Harrison is the emerging star, man. Harrison is the guy. Post-Beatles.
Yeah.
I mean, the most surprising thing for me is how weak McCartney's solo work was.
Right.
Well, I love Ram, man. I love Ram. Ram is an amazing record.
I guess I haven't listened to that one very much.
That's the peak.
McCartney.
That's really kind of the peak. McCartney, but yeah, it's funny when you think about the feel, the texture of All Things Must Pass. That's the closest thing to the magic that the Beatles brought, right. And at that point you think, wow, timbrally and texturally, what George brought to the party, Beatle-wise, right. Really provided.
He wasn't allowed to do when he was in the Beatles.
Well, that's the whole thing. This guy was sitting on music probably for 4 or 5 years that he wasn't allowed to, put on a Beatle album. And then he just he came out of the gates like, whoa, like a bull. And
what I love though is that
amazing music. I think
to me he brought that music. To me, he brought that music on every guitar track that he provided to a Lennon McCartney song.
Yep.
It's like I think that music and that magic is just there when George Harrison put his finger on the guitar.
He pretty much invented the new lead guitar. Flavor of any from that point forward, nobody could touch him, and
he became a great slide player.
Yes,
that's
he never played any slide on the Beatle albums, and then he comes out with this slide persona.
Yeah, let it be. I think he had a slide or two, right?
Actually, I think the only slide guitar on Let It Be is John on For You Blue, because that's John playing that.
What was that tune? What was that tune that Harrison said? Elmore James got nothing on this guitar.
Yeah, but that was John playing.
Okay. Yeah, I remember George was playing bass on that black Strat, right?
John was too. John played. There's like a 6-string, like a baritone guitar or something,
just where it's tuned to something.
An electric 6-string bass. He played bass. John played bass on Long and Winding Road.
Uh-huh.
You can hear him just like sliding around the neck, trying to land on the right note. But it sounds great.
Cool.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, I spoke to Bobby Whitlock a few months ago from.
Oh shit.
Yeah, Derek and the Dominoes, and he was all over All Things Must Pass. And
yeah, it's beautiful. That's right.
Yeah, and if you go back and start thinking about the bands that came from that album, Derek and the Dominoes came from.
Derek and the Dominoes.
The Stones got their horn section from that band.
And all of that derived from Delaney and Bonnie, right?
Delaney and Bonnie. Yeah, that whole Leon Russell crew. That.
Yeah. So that Delaney and Bonnie's group, that was assembled completely away from mainstream rock and roll, ended up like seeding all these other huge bands. It's very interesting.
Yep. And
okay, Mike,
Joe
Cocker. Story?
Yeah.
Here's a funny story, Delaney and Bonnie story. That it was like 1977 or 78. I was at this party in the Valley, and of course everybody's drinking and doing blow and doing and all that. And Delaney and Bonnie are there, so they're jamming. Delaney, is in the back room and everything, and there's another acoustic guitar, so I just picked it up and started playing. And Delaney says, "Oh man, where have you been? Can I hire you to be in my band?" I'm crazy. I know like 5 chords.
Yeah.
I can't play guitar.
Right.
You played them right though. You played them right.
Wow.
Whatever it was, man. It's just like I reflect back on that. Like, Delaney wanted me to be guitarist in this band.
Wow.
So fucking ridiculous.
Anyway, Bobby told me this story. He said that Isaac Hayes and David Porter, were writing. They were writing partners. And anyway, Porter's in the bathroom one day, and Isaac Hayes comes to the door and bangs on the bathroom door, and he yells, "Come on, we got to get out of here!" And Porter yells out the bathroom door, "Hold on, I'm coming!" And it became a hit.
There you go.
Yeah, Whitlock.
Is that true? Is that a true story?
That's a true story.
I think, yeah. As a matter of fact, I think I read that in like an old Rolling Stone interview.
Yeah,
but it was like it might have been Sam or Dave that told the story. I can't remember.
Yeah,
Never
Bobby was the first white artist to be signed to Stax Records.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So he used to hang out there. That was his home away from home. He used to live in that place. And
What a trip.
Yeah, great story.
Oh man, that's too good. I played that song so many times.
I know.
When I was 11 and 12 and stuff. And those bands.
Hold on, I'm coming.
It's never occurred to me, but of course,
yeah,
it's got to happen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So, who are we listening to these days? Mike, you told me about some of your new guys. I would love to talk to them. Maybe do some interviews with them as they're recording with you. That would be cool.
So what am I listening to? You saying?
Yeah, outside of the stuff you're working on.
Neil Young, like almost exclusively.
Yeah.
I've been kind of obsessed with Neil Young lately. Actually, a combination of Neil Young and Gentle Giant. So that's
really
that's a pretty a little eclectic, but that's like when I have to get in the car to do a grocery pickup, which is pretty much the only place I go.
Yeah.
That's when I listen to music.
Which Neil Young albums?
Right now that he put out this archive set, which contains a huge amount of unreleased stuff from 72 to 76. So it's the stuff that he was doing around the time of Time Fades Away and On the Beach and Tonight's the Night and Zuma. So that era. So all that music, which I already loved, but then a ton of additional music that he was writing and recording around the same time, all of similar quality, all very intense, emotionally and melodically very strong, and sonically very, very present and strong. Some of it are solo demos of songs that he wrote that just. There's a song called Barefoot Floors. It's not even on the box, but is on his website, the Neil Young Archives website, which is just like endless, incredible music available to stream. But then there's a piece called Goodbye Christians on the Shore, which was written and recorded around the time of the Journey Through the Past film that he directed. Just a beautiful song, like mind-blowingly good song, the equal of anything that was on Harvest or after the Gold Rush, and it's just like sitting in a tape box in his vault. It really, I just love the feel of his music, man. I could just strap on headphones and have my mind blown all the time. As a composer,
and like after the Gold Rush and Harvest, that I stopped listening after that. I was into different stuff, but
yeah, he got into his response to the stardom of Harvest, because that Harvest was huge. Right. It thrust him into a new echelon, a new spotlight, and the music that he made in response to that is referred to as the ditch period, because he wrote in the liner notes to a compilation album he did called Decade that he said the Harvest album placed me right in the middle of the road. And so the music that I made after that was me driving in the ditch. A little bit rougher ride, but the scenery was more interesting.
Well,
wow.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's really interesting. I like Neil Young. Yeah,
and then the other thing I've been listening to is Tom York's most recent solo album, which is called Anima.
Uh-huh.
And I love Radiohead very much, and Tom York's done a lot of interesting solo music, but this is the first album. You know, if you listen to it on headphones, it really takes you somewhere. The sonically, it's very remarkable, and the writing is really beautiful, and his performance is really beautiful.
Cool.
Wow.
So that's what I'm up to. Ed, what are you listening to?
I haven't been listening to music at all. I've been more, you know, I never thought this situation would come to pass, and having participated creatively in Joe's Garage more than you'd probably expect, you know, in terms of even the concept, just brainstorming sessions with Frank. I've just been kind of studying all that, the sociological thing that's been going on, and what happens to people in terms of being driven towards cultdom, you know, and so I've just been kind of away from music.
Gotta get back.
Are you able to like maintain equilibrium and stay happy while you're involved in that kind of study?
You mean like what, physically?
As a person, yeah. Just like can you stay?
No, it hasn't. No, not really. Although I am in good health, I just, you know, I was like a hardcore runner until I was 50, and I've always been. I think I set a good foundation. Where, with that foundation, I'm still in good health.
That's just I approach that from the point of view of your friend with a certain amount of concern. It's like it is important to like be aware of cult mentality, but if you spend a lot of time digging into that, like I would just suggest that you spend a little bit of time listening to music every once in a while.
Well, I really should, but it's like something I've always been fascinated in, and the thing is, I don't buy into it. I observe it, like what happens to people. I'm just kind of interested in sociology and human nature, you know, when it's always been, until this thing hit, it's always been like, you know, there's music to do, there's music to do, there's music to do, there's music to do. And this kind of like put a stop to that. And I've always wanted to kind of just study the nature of all this, the human nature and, you know, sociological things. But I'm sick of it. It's like, it's enough now.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
If I hadn't broken my arm 3 months ago, I would have been back just playing more sooner.
Well,
but I can't play for another week, so they say.
How was your healing going? How's the healing process going?
I got like 6 weeks left, and then I should be fine. It's coming along fine.
You guys,
but it's, you know.
You guys want to know who I'm listening to? Anybody care who I'm listening to?
Sure.
I'm listening to this guy named Jackie Levin. Does anybody ever hear Jackie Levin?
I don't think so.
Okay, Jackie had a band called Doll by Doll, like a punk band years and years ago. He's from Ireland, and he was leaving the studio one night, and he got jumped, and somebody strangled him, and they cut his vocal cords.
Jesus.
Yeah. Anyway, he went on painkillers, and of course, from that, he became a junkie. And his wife and him got him on a holistic thing, and they weaned him off of heroin. And he put out some brilliant solo albums. Again, his name's Jackie Levin.
Great.
He passed away.
Okay.
He passed away a few years ago. But if you ever have a chance, check out some Jackie Levin stuff. He's incredible. Does a lot of acoustic work. He's mostly an acoustic troubadour type guy. And then I've been listening.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, incredible guy. Again, Jackie Levin. One of the albums that Laswell just produced is by a guy named Christo Radzewski. He happens to be an MD in New York. He's from Macedonia. He put out an album called Hubris, Hubris, and it's pretty much about death and life kind of thing. And it's a brilliant album. And then I just kind of got into like the Ozric Tentacles and a lot of old gong material and things like that. And
that's good That's a good vibe.
Yeah, and Lee Scratch Perry. Been listening to a lot of Lee Perry stuff lately too, for some reason.
Oh man, I love.
That reminds me, I never heard that Flo and Eddie album. I never heard Rocksteady, but I remember it.
I'll send you a copy of it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And
Thank you. I'm curious.
Yeah, and I'll send you Hubris, and I'll send you some Jackie Levin stuff to turn you on to in the beginning.
Oh, thank you, Elliot. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll be happy.
Listen, it's occurred to me that I never had dinner, and I'm just about to pass out.
Oh, yeah, I do that to people. Usually women, but I do make people pass out.
Okay, well listen.
And usually it takes a roofie.
Thanks.
Remember that this radio show is listener funded. If you wish to contribute, our PayPal info is notyourmothersradio@gmail.com. That's notyourmothersradio@gmail.com. We would like to thank you in advance for any contributions.